All right, my friends, welcome to the show. I'm your host, Una Duncan, and today I have a show that is all about getting you financially free and doing it in a way that is awesome for your community. I got to sit down with Mel Dorman, author of Bank on Your Neighbor and self described financial activist. They are going to tell you their story of going from living in the slums of Kolkata to a real estate portfolio of $7 million. And yes, you are going to hear the exact strategy Mel used. And actually, we get a little bit into the nitty gritty of real estate finance, which I know some of you will nerd out about. But even if that is not your jam, hang in there because Mel says the real work was all the woo woo mindset stuff. And holy shit, do they deliver on that. So, if you have any interest in shifting your financial reality, and especially if you want to do it in a way that helps out everyone in your community, you're going to want to hear this.
Breaking news. Your dream life isn't going to happen because you made a vision board. You're going to need goals, grit, and some woo-woo shit. This podcast is about getting clarity on what you want, having the grit to do the actual work, and most importantly, constantly training your brain to be your bitch. Ready to be inspired? Here is your host, best-selling author, Una Duncan.
All right, we got Mel Dorman here. Thank you so much for being here, Mel.
Oh, thank you for having me.
I really enjoyed your book. And here's the first question I want to ask you. So you started out as a social worker and you were living paycheck to paycheck. And you even thought that money was a dirty word. Can you talk about that early mindset?
Oh, yes. So I grew up in a really Christian conservative environment. And in that context, one, I wasn't okay to be gay. So I was really trying to earn the approval of my community. And the best way that I could think of doing that as a woman in a Christian context was to be of service to humanity. So in college, I really focused on sociology and global studies. And that really got me into these niches of like humanitarian work and social work. So I really didn't think that money was good because my own self-worth was damaged being a queer person in a community of Christians, to be honest. And so once I started to realize that my own limiting beliefs, my own ideas about money were what were trapping me in my own poverty, then I started to reimagine what money could mean for my life. And I saw it then as a tool to help other people.
Wow, and I think so many people listening, even without that background, women can completely relate to this idea of in order to be a good and valuable woman, I need to be of service. Absolutely. Yeah. You've written about practicing what you call financial celibacy, opting out of capitalism on moral grounds. Would you say that your mind has changed about that?
Yeah, I definitely have changed my mind about that. I really don't think there is such thing as financial celibacy. I think it's sort of this myth that we have in society that, oh, I don't like capitalist things, so I'm just going to be over here. And as somebody who, was a social worker, I thought I was sort of pure by just keeping my finances small and being of service to the world, that somehow I was escaping the system of capitalism. But in retrospect, I was actually just subjugating myself to the system of capitalism and disempowering myself and keeping myself small and oppressed. And so it was this awakening moment, much like we do with sexuality in celibacy. I realized that saying no to money was actually just holding my own expression and my own fullness behind. So I changed my perspective and I integrated money in a way that was fruitful rather than harmful for the people around me.
Well, we definitely want to hear about that moment, but can you paint the picture a little bit before? So you tell some amazing stories about living in India and what your life was like before you had this realization. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, I lived in a slum in Kolkata, India after graduating from college, and I helped women out of sex trafficking. We taught them how to make handbags and t-shirts that we sold all over the world. And it really was the first time that I got to see business or capitalism used in such a way that it would actually create freedom in the lives of the people around me. And I got to share this story because it's really powerful.
Please. Yeah, you got amazing stories.
Yeah. So while I was in India, I was studying international development and I stumbled across this guy named Muhammad Yunus. I don't know if you've heard of him, but he's a Nobel Peace Prize winner. And basically he was a college professor at the School of Bangladesh. And every day he's teaching supply and demand as an economics professor. But just outside the university gates, people were starving. It was a third world country. And so one day he decided he wanted to make a difference and change that. And so he went out into the community and he met this woman who was making little bamboo, stools. And he asked her how much money she made. And she said just a few cents a day. And when he inquired why, it wasn't because she wasn't, working hard and she wasn't smart or any of that. It was because she couldn't afford the $5 a day that she needed to buy bamboo in bulk, which meant that she had to borrow money from a loan shark, and that ate up all of her profit every day. And so what he did is he created these little groups right then and there. He decided to gather all the women in that village, and get this, to liberate 42 women in a slum in Bangladesh. Guess how much it cost?
Oh, something so achievable, I'm guessing.
$27.
Oh,
okay,
man.
$27.
Yeah.
So he asked these women, okay, here, I'm going to loan you out of my pocket $27. But he believed if he taught them financial literacy and he gave them accountability and they met together with one another, that they would be good borrowers. And so that's what he did. And they paid him every penny back, which gave him the knowledge that the poor are actually really good borrowers in this context. And so he started what was called the Grameen Bank. And that lends billions of dollars to millions of women all over the world, helping them out of poverty. And it really became the cornerstone of what I'm doing now, which is teaching financial literacy and interpersonal trading or peer-to-peer lending through the same model, but in the United States.
Wow. Isn't there, Mel, this is called microfinance, right? When you give
Yeah.
tiny loans to, yeah.
Mhm.
And isn't there an
Mhm.
amazing platform where you can do what's it called? Tell us about that.
Oh, I don't know
do you
his
remember?
platform. Yeah, I just know
Okay,
the
no,
Grameen Bank.
worries.
Yeah, but there's great places to do this and participate. Yeah.
Awesome. Okay, dudes, I'm gonna look that platform up and I'll do it in the outro and I'll say how you can get involved, because it is amazing. You can scroll through all of these incredible businesses run by women all over the world, and really they need $50 in order to buy the materials or whatever. It's incredible. Thank you for painting that picture. That is awesome. And you were in Kolkata helping women get out of the sex trade. Exactly how were you doing that?
Yeah, so I was actually living with local people. So you can imagine, my right hand was what I ate with. This was my fork, and the left hand was what I was wiping with. And let me tell you, you only mix those up once. But yeah, I lived amongst the people. They taught me how to speak their language, how to dress, how to live, really. And it was really trying to just empower local people right where they were. And so these folks, 200 women had been forcibly trafficked into sex slavery that we were working with, and many of them as kids. And what we would do is teach them how to make handbags and t-shirts that we'd sell all over the world at places like Whole Foods. And that way they'd have a financial way to get out of the sex trade. They could still pay the pimps because they were, enslaved in this way financially, but they didn't have to do it through sex work anymore. And so that was the liberation movement.
Wow. So was that your big aha moment that capitalism can help people, and maybe including yourself, find freedom? Or was there something else that happened closer to home? I'm thinking about your dad's story.
Yeah, so after I spent a year working in Kolkata helping these women out of sex trafficking and seeing how business could be used for good, I came back only to realize that, in my first world country, that I was actually the really financially disempowered person. My family was blue collar, middle class, and at age 67 years old, my dad was diagnosed with Alzheimer's. And at the time, I was 23 years old. I had $10,000 in my checking account, and I was shocked to find out that my family had nothing saved up. So when doctors told us that it was going to cost $7,000 a month to take care of my dad, we were devastated. I mean, he was the breadwinner. So that got my wheels spinning. As a social worker, I was making like $3,000 a month. There was no way that I was going to be able to afford that. And so that's what really prompted me to self-educate and learn about real estate as a vehicle to build wealth.
Wow. But how did you make that leap? I'm just picturing getting that news, looking in the, probably you're so young too, looking to your parents to be like, wait, how are you not the adults? How are you not going to take care of me? I'm only 20 something. And then how did you make the leap to, well, I can do this and I can do it through real estate?
Yeah, so I was literally just sitting at my desk. I was working at LA County Jail. So I'm processing inmates, I'm doing mental health treatment with them. And of course, there's a lot of downtime in jail, even when you're a social worker. So I just spent my downtime reading books and podcasts. And I started to realize that real estate was a very accessible way for most individuals to build wealth. You didn't have to become a day trader. You didn't have to get some sort of degree. There weren't these barriers of entry like many other ways. And so I just started studying everything I could for 20 hours a week. And after a year, I sent out some letters to people in my community, just trying to connect with them. And that's when I got my first duplex.
how did you get a duplex without, I mean, you had 10 grand, which is amazing that you saved up 10 grand in your 20s. I mean, that already shows that you were somebody who is quite financially responsible and proactive, I suppose is a better word. But so you had your 10 grand, but for most people, 10 grand does not a duplex make. How did that happen?
Well, so when I was working that year at the LA County Jail, I was also working overtime saving up. So I'd saved up, about $50,000, and I spent around 30 of that on that first duplex. So 16 of it was the down payment. I used an FHA loan, and then the rest of it I used to remodel it. But unfortunately, while I was moving into that property, I got a call from my sister with some really bad news that my dad was dying. And so here I'd just spent, a year and a half learning about real estate, finally getting something that I could sell for a profit that I could take care of my family with. And I was too late.
I'm so sorry.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because your intention was to take care of your dad. And the show's called Goals, Grit, and some woo-woo shit. And often, in personal development, and I'm sure you probably consume as much of that stuff as I do, but they often say it's not the how. If your why is clear enough, if your why is strong enough, you will find the how. And in your case, it was you're like, my dad needs 7 grand a month, and I'm going to figure out a way to make that happen. And you figured out a way to make a real estate deal happen. That's incredible. What effect did that have on you when you saw that your dad, who worked his whole life, I believe he did actual physical labor his whole life, right?
Yeah. He was a roofer.
He was a roofer, right? So and even given that he worked so hard, he did not have enough to take care of himself when he got sick. And was that one of the biggest catalyst moments for you, saying, oh, it's not that the hard workers will be rewarded? That's not true.
Yeah, it's not true. We grew up with this myth or this idea that if we just go to school and we get a college degree and we clock in for 30 or 40 years, that it's just all going to work out at the end. But Americans are finding more and more that that's just not the case. And my dad was a perfect example of that. He spent 50 years as a worker or as a roofer working, 6-7 days a week. And at the end of the day, without financial literacy and without investments of his own, his company did not take care of him, and Social Security was not enough. And so that was my breaking point. I actually went to my dad's bedside and I got to tell him about my duplex. And it was this really emotional moment of saying goodbye. And what I did in that moment is I realized, like, I didn't want my fate to be like my dad's. And so I did something really drastic. I quit my day job as a social worker that day, and I jumped all in on real estate investing, which was pretty crazy because I only had $16,000 left in my checking account. But I was so emboldened watching my dad live and die the way that he did that I couldn't clock in for anybody else except for my own dreams anymore. And that started me on this journey. And the reason I felt so emboldened too was because I just learned about seller financing as a way to build wealth. And so I knew that I could do it without a lot of money or even without a job.
Okay, so you're going to need to explain that because everybody is wondering, wait, what? How can you just be like, I'm a real estate investor now with the 16 grand and no full-time job to tell the bank that I've got a full-time job and a credit rating, blah, blah, blah. I'm assuming you didn't have any of that stuff. Did you have a stellar credit rating and all the rest?
I did. Yeah, good credit. I had good credit. Yeah. I was a very responsible person, but no job. I just got my realtor license, but no income. So no bank was going to look at me at all. And I had learned about seller financing, which is when somebody can pay a seller directly instead of using a bank loan. So imagine finding a neighbor down the street who owns their house outright and they're ready to downsize or retire. You can actually work out a deal directly with them and just pay them in installment payments, which means you can come up with the interest rate, the down payment, the length of the term of the loan. Everything is negotiable and there's no gatekeepers like the banks holding us back.
Okay, so there's someone down the street from me, for example, in this scenario who they've had their home for a long time. Maybe they're ready to downsize. And I approach them and I say, oh, don't put that on the market. I will buy it from you, but I'll just pay you in installments. That's how it goes?
Yeah, exactly. So this was actually a very popular method in the 70s and 80s when interest rates were 17, 18, 19%. And so right now there are millions of boomers who lived during that time who have a working memory of when we as a nation used to use seller financing more actively. And if you find those folks, they often have equity because boomers 55 and older have on average 52% equity in their homes. And in some states up to 80%. Like I think Vermont or something. So there's some really good places, but basically you're finding somebody who understands that model. And if they do, they already know it's really great. Like I don't know if you've seen like a mortgage statement or seen like closing paperwork, right? It's like the purchase price is 500,000 and the interest is 700,000. So you're paying
Yep.
almost more than double usually in
And the
interest for the
fees and the
house.
closing costs
Yeah.
and all of that. Yeah, yeah,
All
yeah.
of that
It's
stuff. It's
mhm,
like,
mhm.
do you want to make your payment to a big bank or financial institution, or Wall Street really is where it's going? Or do you want to make your payment to a neighbor down the street and help them retire or help send their kid to college?
And are you getting an interest-free loan then? Is that the idea? Explain how it works. Can you explain the pros of this system for both the seller and the
Yeah.
purchaser?
Yeah, absolutely. So for the seller, the pros are this: it's a very secure investment. If I don't pay the seller, they can foreclose on me. And in Oregon, that's $15,000. So as long as I hand them $15,000 in the down payment, they can use my own money to get the property back if I should fail to pay them. So very secure investment. You can't do that with stocks, right? Stocks go down, bummer. It's
Yeah, yeah,
gone,
yeah.
right? But in this case, you can take the property back and resell it. So they're very secure. The second reason, the most important reason, is that sellers get all of that interest. So hundreds of thousands of dollars get redirected away from Wall Street into our community and into their pockets. And so it's very lucrative. And the third reason why is that they're going to delay their capital gains tax. So in this case, if you're selling a building and it was worth 700,000, you'd probably have to pay around 200,000 in capital gains taxes if you've owned it for a long time, which the sellers that I'm seeking, that's where they're at. And so they don't want to lose $200,000 on day one, because then they'll have to take what's left and reinvest it at a very high rate in order to achieve what I can give them, paying them directly pre-taxes, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that does. Okay. And in your case, you don't have to qualify for a loan at the
Yes.
bank.
Oh, yes. Yeah. So the buyer, of course, right? I'm telling you all the sellers.
Yeah.
So for the buyer, there's a lot of great advantages too. So for me, it means everything's flexible. I don't have to jump through all the bank hoops that you usually would do. So you can pick the down payment size with the seller, the interest rate. One of the big things that I like to do is called interest only payments. And so that means I'm not paying principal each month. I'm just paying interest. And that usually cuts the payment down by like a third. So if you're trying to create a rental portfolio and you want it to cash flow quickly with very little money out of pocket, that's a huge unlock, because all of a sudden money that you would be handing to the seller each month stays in your pocket. But there's so many creative terms that you can do with seller financing. And to me, the biggest benefit is that it strengthens our communities. These are interdependent relationships that are creating mutual aid between buyer and seller. And I have a vested interest in the seller's future, and they have a vested interest in mine. And so I think
Hmm.
it's at the end of the day, it's really creating community.
Yeah. Well, that's what I want to ask you. For someone who's not necessarily interested in real estate, what are some of the principles behind what you've accomplished that they can apply to their financial life?
So if they didn't want to own real estate at all, I think generally what I'm trying to teach people is that there's a lot of power in interdependency. There's a lot of power when we work directly together instead of using big banks, financial institutions, corporations. And we've already done this in a lot of different areas. Like imagine in 1990, if I would have said, hey, could I rent your room out in your house tonight for $50 and you can just supply with like all the shampoo and everything. And would that be cool? I'll be there at 5 p.m. Everybody would have thought you were crazy, right?
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
today, that's just normal. We'd use Airbnb. We work directly together in these ways, and we don't question it at all. And sure, there's, platforms like Uber and Airbnb that are making money off of that. But generally, we're working directly together, and that puts the profit back in the hands of people.
So have you thought of developing an app to connect sellers and buyers? I bet you have.
Yes, I am. It's on the horizon. I want to create like a Zillow meets Tinder.
Oh, totally. Totally. Because
Yeah.
it is so much about relationships. So how do you do this? Do you do the classic realtor, like send a letter that says, I'm interested in buying your home? That's like, is that what you do?
I mean, so I call them love letters. It's similar to what
Uh-huh.
you're talking about, but imagine what your grandmother might send you in the mail. It's like a square card. It looks like a birthday card. It's got hand address on the front, a cute stamp with maybe some flowers or something. That's what it looks like. And on the inside is just an invitation to get to know each other with, saying that I'm interested in buying their property one day. And maybe that's not this year, maybe it's 10 years from now, but I'm in their community and I'd like to get to know them. So it's very relationship driven, and then the property comes second.
Mel, how many properties have you accumulated doing this?
So I had 34 rental units that I bought in 5 years. Last year, I consolidated those down to 16 units now. So just trying to make it more manageable.
With a seed capital of 16 grand. That was
Yeah,
what you started with.
yeah, initially
Or
16
30,
grand.
sorry. Yeah.
Yeah. Initially with that, I think all in my entire real estate portfolio is around $7 million, and I spent 180,000 to buy it all. So
Wow.
yeah, I don't know. I think that's
That
like a
is incredible.
2% down payment, somewhere around there. It's pretty, maybe 2.5% down. So no bank would offer that.
No, no, I don't think so. Do you have a big team of people that helps you accomplish this?
No, I mean, honestly, when I first got started, I was just, sending out letters, cold calling, door knocking people. I was just, ex social worker, just spending my days trying to meet people in my community, asking them over and over and over, would you let me buy your home from you? Would you let me buy your rental property from you? And the cool thing is, once you understand finance and you understand how to solve people's problems, like real problems, like how am I going to retire, or what am I going to do with this house I just inherited that I don't really want to pay taxes on or deal with, or how am I going to deal with these like tenants that I'm getting too old to care for? Like these are real people's problems in our community, and when you can solve that and generate hundreds of thousands of dollars for their pocketbook, then the money follows. They want to help you too. And so it's really just an
Hmm.
understanding of how to create value that really generates all this.
So, can you give some examples of how to create value other than, buying someone's house and they want to get rid of it? Tell me how you being creative with terms can
Mhm.
help solve real people problems.
I'll give you an example of one of my coaching students. All right. So, Sorsha came to me last August, and she had a midterm rental company, which is where you rent month to month to travel nurses or people whose houses have burned down. Right. And she didn't have any money, but she knew I was the person that teach people how to buy property without any money. So she came to me and said, how can I buy properties? And I said, well, you have this little company, and there's a lot of condos in our market right now. It's just saturated. And a lot of them are underwater because, rates are where they're at and they can't rent them and all this stuff. So they're suffering. They're having two mortgages. They're really underwater. And so she went and met with these folks. And what I taught her is to take this little Airbnb she had in her house, just a little ADU. She's renting out her Airbnb for $1,500. And I taught her how to raise private money with friends and family against that little Airbnb. In other words, that $1,500 no longer went to her, it went to them. Right. And so they were secured against that property. If she got hit by a bus, they could sell it and get their money back. So very secure for everybody. And then she took that $40,000 and she went and met with all those condo owners, and she did what's called a lease option, which is a lease with an option to purchase in the next 3 to 5 years. And so in other words, she was able to control the property with $2,000, which is the security deposit. She's furnished it for about another $5,000. And then she rented it not for $2,000, but for $3,500, and she cash flowed the difference. And so in the matter of 6 months, she took $40,000 that she raised and she turned it into $45,000 of passive income through these midterm rentals. So that's just an
Wow.
example. Solving people's
Yeah.
problems, the money follows.
Oh, that's amazing. I love that. You said you became an investor because you never want to feel helpless again. Would you say that that is still what is motivating your financial decisions, or has it become more of a bigger movement?
Yeah, I'd say at this place, in my life, I'm financially free. I reached that goal when I was 35 years old. I have six figures a year. I'm not the person that wants to just grow and grow and grow for no reason. I know there's a lot of folks in the real estate sector and industry that's their aim, right? How legacy wealth, how many doors can I own? But I'm really about having enough. The philosophy of enough. And for me, what matters most is impact. I've always been trying to help people, whether it be in India or as a social worker here, or even now teaching my students how to build wealth. And so when I was 35, I really had this decision where instead of building, I decided I'd switch gears and just start teaching other people how to build financial freedom in their own lives. And to me, that's far more fulfilling. And so I'm not motivated by a fear of not having enough anymore. I'm motivated by the desire to help people build wealth for themselves.
Is there a specific kind of person that you like working with the most? I know you dealt with sex workers in Kolkata, and now that you're here in North America, who are the financially disenfranchised that you like working with most?
Yeah, my avatar, the person that I'm seeking out the most, are women, queer, and BIPOC folks, because I find that in the real estate world, those folks don't usually have books that are written to them. They are often the ones that are marginalized. When flippers gentrify neighborhoods, these are the folks that are usually hurt by that. And so I wanted to bring a message of community and unity and really just financial literacy to a group of people that don't usually have financial literacy spelled out in words that they can resonate with.
Do you have a story of a client that you helped change their financial life and it's one of your favorite stories?
Last month, I had the honor of helping a single mom who was moving up from Austin. She had a trans kid and they were fleeing because, well, Texas has changed their rules around trans folks. And so she's a social worker. She was moving up here, really just trying to get a start. And we met and I told her the difference between buying a single family house and buying something that would be income producing, like a duplex. And then, her ears perked up as somebody who doesn't make a lot of money and is a single mom trying to deal with everything that she was. She was like, yeah, I could get on board with this. And so we searched for some duplexes. I ended up finding her one that was in this great location, walking distance from one of the best parts of Portland. And she turned that into a midterm rental. And so she's cash flowing day one, and she only put 5% down. She did a regular conventional loan, but she is now owning an asset, and her, her kiddo is able to just have more financial security and social, support here in a place like Portland.
And feel safe. Yeah, that's amazing. And is that what tell me more about what your book is called Bank on Your Neighbor. And so what for you does it mean to bank on each other?
Yeah, I think our society, there's this assumption that we can't trust each other. And I think it's because, cities are big. It's anonymous. It's hard to know who's for you, who's against me. You like who can you relate with? Who's going to harm you? And so I think we walk around sort of distrustful. The bigger the city, the more that we aren't sure who we can trust. And instead, what we end up doing is over relying on corporations, and we feel attached to logos and mottos, and we think we know them because they're in our pantry or they're on our, the logo on our shirt or whatnot. But really, so many of our problems could be solved when we work collectively together and we cut out the middleman, the banks, the corporations, and these large entities that aren't actually serving people anymore. One of the big things that we see in the United States is that wealth is growing, a huge disparity between the rich and the poor. And generation over generation, that gap has just been growing wider and wider. And a big part of that, according to Robert Reich, the economist, is that we've been moving from what's called a stakeholder version of capitalism to a shareholder version of capitalism. And in a stakeholder capitalism, you know each one of the stakeholders. Like think about a mom and pop shop. They know their customers, their suppliers, the neighborhood they live in and they work in, and they care about each one of those constituents when they make their business decisions. And that's where we used to be as a nation. We mostly had that kind of economy. But over time, we've moved more and more towards franchises and corporations and what's called a shareholder economy. And how that's run is there's a CEO who reports not to the suppliers, employees, customers. No. They're reporting only to their shareholders. And so those are the folks that own stocks. And so every month, every quarter, they're just chasing that bottom line, trying to drive up profits so they can appease their stockholders. But the problem is 90% of the stocks are owned by 10% of the people. And so when we have an economy that's built like that, where we're separating from one another and we're relying on institutions and banks and all these sorts of things, we're actually just funneling money upwards horizontally instead of sharing money and resources horizontally, member to member, community members.
In my mind, I am thinking of your model and how much it would have been useful for my family. Can I tell you?
Oh, yeah, please.
So, my mom just sold our family cottage and it was devastating, but we needed the liquidity, but she paid horrible capital gains on it, like a huge amount of capital gains on it. And if we had sat down with someone like you, we would have said, here's this cottage, the upkeep, we cannot keep up with it anymore. Nobody is around to rent it out profitably, although it probably could be rented out profitably. We're just not here to do it. And this place is so sentimental for us. We would love, our dream would have been for someone to do the seller mortgage so that we wouldn't have to pay capital gains. And could we rent it from you for 1 week every month so we can come back to our family cottage that we love? That would have been perfect. Yeah. So that's another option for your students who are doing seller financing. Go find the boomers with the cottages.
Yes. Yeah. Second homes. Yeah, absolutely. There's so many people trying to downsize.
And although I know you are so passionate about helping people build wealth, you have said that wealth is not built in institutions and in portfolios, it's built in community. So can you tell me what it would look like when you are creating a wealth in your community? Like, for example, maybe when you're talking about that kid who is the trans kid who now feels safe, who's feeling wealthy because they're in a community that supports them. Yeah. Is that what you mean by that?
Well, so what I mean is the way that we've been doing money, we're sort of disconnected from each other. We pay a financial institution, that financial institution lends us money back. We stick our money into a savings account, we get 1 or 2%, they lend it back to us at 7 or 8. And so you can see that process of extraction by relying on a bank. Versus if you rely on a person or you create an interdependent relationship with a neighbor, then that money and those resources are actually going to them each month. And they're going to probably spend it locally, right? At a coffee shop, or maybe they're, going to the doctor or whatever, but most of those funds are going to stay local. And when you think about a typical American budget, we might spend $2,000 or $3,000 a month on our housing. And a large portion of that, whether you're a renter or you're a homeowner, is mortgage interest. And so roughly, I think, around $9,000 a household per year, or $400 billion a year, is going to banks in mortgage interest. And that money could be relocated back to our communities through seller financing. And so when I say that we're building wealth collectively, I literally mean we're redirecting wealth, and we're refunneling it, almost like we're replumbing it. Instead of flowing it to Wall Street, we're literally turning the knob and redirecting that wealth back into our communities.
Can you think of any other example for people who are scared of real estate or seller financing? And I know that's 100% your jam, and it's amazing. I think people are going to be like, whoa, 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 teach me more about that. But for anyone who's like, I love all of these principles, and I'm not sure if that's my vehicle. Can you think of other ways that everyday people can start keeping the money circulating in their communities instead of
Yeah.
sending it to big corporations and Wall Street?
Yeah. So one of the cool things is I'm teaching people how to do this, right? I'm teaching leaders in our community to create these deals and make them mutually beneficial, win-win arrangements. But a lot of those folks don't have a lot of money, right? So they're in the same situation that I was. They're learning how to do this, but they don't have a lot of capital to keep going. And what's beautiful is I'm teaching them to go out into their community once they are good at this and they're savvy and they're able to create, deals that are sustainable. I'm teaching them how to lend money with their friends and family. So what's beautiful about that is it's also turning not just the seller into the bank, but it's turning your mom and dad, your friends, your colleagues, anybody who wants to make money in real estate without actually getting into the real estate, right? Just don't want to deal with all the tenants or the toilets or figuring out how to find a deal or negotiate it. It's not for everyone, right? But I just involve folks. I'm like, hey, can I pay you 8 or 9%? What are you getting at your bank right now? Probably not 8 or 9%.
All, yeah.
Yeah. So I have this cash flowing fourplex. It's making $3,000 a month. I would like to lend, 90% up to value. There's still equity. If I get hit by a bus, you can sell it. You're safe. Right. And I'd like to give you my cash flow in exchange for my next down payment.
Wow. And how often do people bite at that? I would imagine you have to have quite a conversation about it. You've got contracts. Do people's jaw drop when you ask them about that?
Well, so yeah,
I
know, right? It sounds wild asking people for money.
It does sound wild, and it's also, everyone is so afraid to mix friends and money. That is sort of such a hardcore boundary for people. So how do you get over that discomfort?
Yeah. So one of the things that I teach my coaching students is the importance of keeping people along the journey with you. So even when you're first learning about real estate and you're just tipping your toes in and just starting to learn all the different principles, I encourage my students, tell your friends and family what you're learning. Just let them see, behind the curtain, all the different steps. And then I encourage them to do their first deal by themselves, right? If you can't use your own money on the first deal, you shouldn't be asking money from anybody else. You need to prove that you can do this. And I did, right? I bought my first duplex. I did not borrow money. But on my second one, on my triplex, I ended up buying that with just $500 out of pocket. And that's because I lent money from friends and family. And second position, I got $10,000. And so I was able to do that. And so really it's having the competency, proving that. And then I actually teach my students to come with a big leather bound book and just imagine everything that an underwriter would want to see: your credit score, your W-2, your references, personal references, above and beyond, more than anything would anybody want to know, so they can trust you. And that's really how I built that trust, is they could see I have a track record, I have a history of doing well. They can call all the people I've lent money from before, and they feel confident moving forward. And at the end of the day, they have a lien on the property, right? This isn't a handshake. This is a contract that is holding me accountable, not them. If I misbehave, they're going to get the property back with $15,000. And if I've fixed it up, and if it's cash flowing, and if it has equity above and beyond, guess what? They keep that. So I'm very motivated to fulfill my promises.
So they are getting 8% on their loan to you, and then if they're like, "Ooh, I need my capital back," then what do you have to get the money from somewhere else or refinance at a bank or something?
Yeah, so it's through a promissory note. So if they're the ones to
There's a
say, you know
term.
what, yeah, there's a term, right? So if they
Yeah.
say, like for instance, I had a seller one time that lent me about 180,000 for 10 years, and he said on year one, actually, I want that. I'm building a hotel in Vegas. Can I get my money? And I said, sure, no problem. What I do is I write what's called a first right of refusal. So if somebody owns a note, a promissory note, if I'm owing them money, I'm the borrower, they're the lender. They have a note, and that note is something they can sell. So what that particular seller did is he, reached out to folks, he got a price, and he came back to me and said, "Hey, would you buy this?" Now, cool story. I know that this is what the process is, right? I know there's going to be a discount because when somebody sells a note on year 1 of 10, that's not a lot of performance yet. Somebody who's buying it's going to expect to pay less. So fully knowing that, I offered him less. So it was 180,000 that I owed him, and I was snowboarding down Lake Tahoe, and I texted him back. I said, "How about 100?" And he texted me back, "How about 150?" And I said, "How about 110?" And he said, "Sure." So I just made $77,000 snowboarding down that day because he basically dropped my note from 180 to 110. And so all I did was I texted my next seller and I said, "Hey, would you like to have a second position lien on a property that's cash flowing for 110,000?" And basically by the time I got down the mountain, my escrow agent had written it all up, and that was my refinance.
Wow.
Mhm.
That's incredible. What would you say to anyone listening to this who wants to shift, well, their financial reality, but also their relationship with money, as you did?
Yeah, I really think, money is a spiritual journey. It's finding your own agency. It's healing these wounds that we have from capitalism, from oppression, all these different angles that tell us that we're unworthy. And so I think the first thing that people should really focus on is healing that inner wound with money. And the best way you can do that is just start to ask yourself questions like, what is the very bad thing that's going to happen if I own property? Who am I going to become that's so awful if I made $20,000 more a month this month? And you start to dig into those unconscious beliefs and insecurities around having more, because ultimately most people just have a peak in their havingness levels, what I would call it. So they feel comfortable, maybe having $5,000 or $10,000 in their checking account. But if you threw in $100,000 in their checking account, they'd freak out. They'd probably, spend it right away or give it away, or they'd feel guilty, or they'd panic and think that they can't, handle that. But when you've done the work around money in your own self and you've given yourself permission to have it because you recognize it can be a tool for good, and you start to create alignment between your beliefs and your thoughts and your actions, then that's where it becomes possible to build wealth and not feel bad about it. So my recommendation is really to do the inner work before you even try to get into doing the outer work of building wealth, because otherwise you'll just self-sabotage along the way, and then you'll say real estate doesn't work, and it's like, well, you
Yeah.
didn't do the work before you did the work.
How hard was it for you to adjust your ceiling? Or was it not hard because you're like, well, I need 7 grand a month to pay for my dad, so it's happening and I have no guilt about that?
At first, when I just got into real estate investing, there was a lot of like journaling and stuff. And I felt confident when I was making no money and buying property. I still felt like I was this anti-capitalist, like I'm like working my way up, but as a top realtor, I actually was confronted with, what does it mean about me if I'm making 30, 50, $150,000 a month? Like when I started really excelling in my realtor career, those numbers were what I was used to making a year. And so I really actually started to self-sabotage. And that's why I can speak to this. Like I started missing appointments. I started like procrastinating, not doing a good job on my deals as a realtor. And about 2 months into it, I went, wait a second, what's happening here? Why am I getting depressed while I'm getting wealthy? I was
Mm.
like, I know what's happening here. This is about the inner work again. I got to go back. I have a new havingness level, right? I felt comfortable owning property, but I did not feel comfortable making, 100,000 or more a month. That just felt like I was a bad guy. So I went, you're going to laugh at this, but I feel like this is the show where you can share these sorts of things.
Yeah, oh, yeah.
I went to the forest and I meditated and I took some mushrooms and I
Mhm.
sat next to this stream and I was really trying to channel like, what is in the way of this? And I saw this little reed in the water. Like imagine a straw, like it's like got a little tube tube of water, going through it. And I saw this reed, and every time it would sort of like flicker and turn in on itself, it like bend, it would get stuck. And all this pressure would just be like nailing this little reed, right? And it just couldn't do anything. But as soon as it would straighten out and like the water could go through the tube again, I was just flowing. It was easy, right? It was so easy. And I realized in that moment that I was that little reed. And every time I looked at myself and I navel gazed and I asked, am I good enough for this? Am I worthy enough? Am I going to be good at this? Am I going to mess it up? Am I going to be like my parents? Every time I looked at myself, I got in the way. But once I started thinking about other people, when I started thinking about the team that I was building and how I was providing leads so that they could feed their families, and that I was creating transactions so people could own homes, and like getting out of my own way meant that the universe got to do something through me that was really positive for the world. So after I did that little journey, I went from making like $30,000 a month to being very comfortable making like 150 the next year.
Wow. Mel, I love that story so much. And it reminds me so much of I did my master's degree in acting. And when you're doing a scene with someone, they say that you have to be 100% focused on your scene partner and the change that you want to make in them. So the example they always give is, so say you're in a scene and you're trying to seduce your partner, okay, the scene partner. So then you are 100% focused on them and what the change that your actions are making in them and all that stuff. Because if you are focusing on yourself and being seductive, it's so fucking cringe. It's so fucking cringe. And no one wants to see it. And the whole audience is like, oh God, make this stop. But if you are 100% focused on your scene partner, then it's fascinating. And I really do believe, yes, be the reed that allows it to flow through, focus on other people, stop navel gazing. It never works. It never works. And, right before we started talking, we were talking about social media. And Mel's doing amazing on social media. And it's like that too. If you go onto social media and you're like picking yourself apart and you're thinking, does this look good? Is this my angle? Like, oh God, is it cringe? Like whatever. It's not going to come off. But if you're like 1,000%, I got something to say, people need to fucking hear it. This is what you guys got to know. Then it flies, right?
Yeah. It's all that flow state. So much of life is about energy. And I think like it's easy to underestimate, right? You think you're learning about real estate, it has to be about numbers or spreadsheets or whatever. But I will tell you, like, my ability to be so successful has been rooted in the fact that I really care about the people I'm trying to work with. And they see that. They see that my main motivation is to solve their problem first and really understand what their problem is. And I'm sort of second to that. If I can solve their problem and it ends up being a sale to me, great. And if I solve their problem and it just makes them better in life, they can feel that that's my end game. And so I think like energy is everything. Energy is how you get your TikToks or your Instagram to fly. It's how you negotiate a win-win deal. It's how you build relationships.
Totally. Or, and my business is fitness. And if I'm talking to someone and I can solve their fitness problem, I am so fucking excited about it. And I'm like so excited to, but if I go into that conversation thinking, how can I get them to buy my fitness good? It's just never going to work. It's never going to work.
That's so needy. Yeah. The energy is different. It's like, please like me. It's a different energetic question.
Yes. Well, okay. Now that we're talking about the woo-woo shit, which I love, is there any other mindset practices that you think have been instrumental in your journey of going from 16,000 to a portfolio of 7 million?
Yeah, I'm so glad you asked this. In my social work background, I was studying, I was a therapist. So I had all these clinical skills, and I first used them on folks who were getting out of homelessness or getting out of drug addiction or domestic violence or whatnot, right? Really extreme situations. But I used those same tools just to transfer from being a social worker to being a real estate investor, because let me tell you, there's not a natural path, although I'm trying to create it for others. There is not a natural path there. And so some of the things I knew as a social worker is you have to change your context. If you want to stop drinking, stop going to the bar, right? Same thing. If you want to change your financial life, start hanging out with people who have different financial lives, who have different belief systems. So that was a big part of it. I just surrounded myself with a really positive community that were doing the things that I was trying to learn. And they modeled success for me. And then success became by proximity. So that was a big one. The inner
Can I interrupt on that one?
Oh, yeah.
Another way that works, success by proximity, 100%, but also because you're hanging out with these people and they're pretty fucking cool. Before I thought rich people were like, a pig in a top hat, right? And
Yes.
now, no, it's my cool friend Mel. You know what I mean? Like you get a different idea of what a rich person can be, and you're like,
Yes.
okay, I can do that. Yes. Okay, please go on. That was a great one.
Yeah, you're so right. I mean, I had all these really negative beliefs about wealthy people. And so spending time with them and seeing, wow, they have really good character. And wow, they're trying to restore these old homes so that they preserve the character of the neighborhood. And like, they're trying to help people out of really bad circumstances in ways that are less detrimental to them. And it's like all these different ways that I had to deconstruct my beliefs around rich people. And sure, there are bad rich people. There are bad poor people. They're just bad people, It's not because they have money. The money just allows us to make a bigger impression, whatever we are. And so,
Yep.
if you're a generous
Amplifier.
person, yeah, it's an amplifier. Exactly. So I think like psychologically, I did a lot of that inner work, a lot of exploring my negative beliefs around money, working on my havingness level, really questioning why I thought money was bad or why I would become bad if I had more money. And I think also one of the big psychological shifts that I made, and this is we're gonna get real woo-woo here. Okay.
I'm ready. Strapped in.
Okay. So I think for me, one of the big money things that I did, when I was in college, I was a global studies, sociology major, right? And I wasn't always that. I was originally a psychology major, which would have got me like a 6-figure job right out of school. And I would have been, doing great. But I felt this deep need to help people on the margins. And so when I switched my career from psychology to sociology and, more like social work, I knew I wasn't going to make very much money, and I knew that was going to be a huge sacrifice. So on the way back from class, I asked the universe if they could just cover my debt, my student debt. And I felt like we made a pretty strong agreement, like as if we had shook hands, like I'm going to switch my career and you're going to pay for my student debt and we're all good, right? And so I made this promise, and I moved through my schooling and whatnot. And I got to graduation. I'd signed up for this program that had said they were going to pay towards my student debt while I was in India. So it kind of made sense, right? It was like in alignment with what I was thinking. And I think manifestation works like that. It's like I have a goal. I don't know how it's going to pan out, but I'm going to start making steps in that direction. I have a strong belief that I can get there, and the details will sort itself out. So as I'm like preparing to go to India, I'm realizing this is so ridiculous. I even tell my boyfriend at the time, which I don't have boyfriends anymore, as you can tell, but he was like, what are you going to do to pay your student debt? And I was like, I'm not worried about it. Some stranger will pay for it. And, as the words came out of my mouth, I thought I was crazy. I was thinking, this is ridiculous. And so I started thinking, maybe I should back out of this program, right? Like, this is silly. Why would I go live somewhere else for a few years only to have to come back and, pay off all my student debt?
More student debt. Yeah.
Yeah. Like, it doesn't make sense. And so I thought about backing out of the program, but instead my mentor at the time said, just stick with it, go through graduation. You can quit after graduation. I was like, okay. So sure enough, the president of the university invites me and 2 other students graduation day to promote the program that I'm about to back out of. Oh. And I'm thinking, oh my gosh, this is so cringe. And so I'm like standing in front of this audience, and he's introducing us, asking us, where do you plan to go? And I'm like, I'm Mel. I'm trying to go to India, trying not to lie, but I'm definitely lying through my teeth. And right afterwards, he opens up this envelope and he says, Mel, you've been forgiven $105,000. You're free to graduate. And, Courtney, you've been forgiven 170, and, the next person, and so on. And what? I was floored. I was like, oh my gosh, that thing that I thought in my head actually just happened. Oh my God.
That is wild.
It totally changed my life. And so I share that because then, speed up, I'm sitting at my dad's bedside when he's passing away, right? And I'm sitting there going, this is awful. I don't want this to happen. And I thought, okay, universe, we've made some promises before. Let's do this again. Like, you fulfilled on that last one, and I fulfilled on the last one. I went to India. I did the thing. I was like, this time, I'd like you to let me retire in the next 5 years, build wealth enough that I can become financially free. And if you let me do that, and so I don't turn out like my dad, if you let me do that, I promise that I will turn around and teach as many people how to build wealth as possible. And so here I am on the other side of that promise. I reached that in 5 years, and now I'm doing my end of the bargain.
Wow, that's an incredible story. How will you know when you've fulfilled your end? Do you feel like you have fulfilled your end, or you are fulfilling? Like, what is your big, now we're getting woo-woo.
Yeah.
Mel, what is the big vision? Like, I bet you have it.
How
I bet you journal this shit every day. Yeah, let's go to Lulu.
Let's go to Lulu.
How big is this going to be? Let's do it.
Okay, so my big goals, they say you're Delulu until it works, right? So they thought I was Delulu saying I'm going to become financially free, and then look at me. So this is the big goal.
Huge real estate portfolio with no money. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So I'm a big believer. I got a lot of faith. It's working. It's feeling good on me. So here's my Delulu belief. I would like every American to know that seller financing exists and that it is an option for them. And so, I would love to be speaking at Davos, for instance, like the conference for world economics, explaining how this can change all of our communities across the globe. Because everywhere before banks got involved had a form of seller financing. This is how we used to do it before the 1930s when banks got involved. And I just want to bring people back to this space of community and interdependence. And I just want them to know they have that option. Not everybody is going to shop organic and fair trade or whatever, right? But they know it exists. They know that those options exist. And that's what I want seller financing to be.
I can see that. That doesn't feel Delulu at all. I can see you at Davos. And Mel, in your worldwide domination, because I'm expanding this beyond America. So because I'm in Canada, a lot of the listeners are in Canada and the UK.
Yeah.
Do you know if this system works internationally? Do you have international students?
Okay, so I've had this big glow up on social media this summer, and I've met with people from Germany and from a bunch of people from Canada, actually. And what I've done is I've tasked each one of these potential students who want to coach with me. I've said, okay, I need you to go out into your community and find somebody who's doing what they call usually is vendor financing, is sort of the UK version or
vendor take
version.
back mortgage, I think I know.
Yeah,
it is. Yeah.
For Canadians, it's exactly. It's vendor take back. So I've given this task out in the last month to 3 potential students, and they're all trying to find this mentor because I don't feel ethical teaching them all these things if they don't have somebody on the ground who can also teach them the nuances of their particular vendor financing stuff. But generally through ChatGPT, yes, you can do it anywhere. But the nuances and the legalities are the minutia that I would want students to have connections in their local community too.
Yeah. Well, and this idea of community finance is obviously internationally applicable.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the Grameen Bank is the microfinance version of it, but yeah, in general, we can always lend money together. There's a version of a promissory note wherever you go. It's a matter of strengthening the social fabric of our communities that we trust each other enough to be interdependent.
Mel, I've loved this conversation so much. Is there any final thought that you want to leave listeners with? And I think listeners are probably intrigued and wondering what a first step for them would be.
Yeah. I want to share this quote before I do that. But, Muhammad Yunus is somebody I brought up a little bit earlier. And one of the quotes that he says that really resonates with me is that the poor are not a financial risk. They're a financial revolution if only someone would trust them first. And that quote to me is exactly how I feel about the American public. We are blocked out of bank financing. Most Gen Z, most millennials cannot get a home loan. We are priced out and interest rates are too high and we have too much student debt. And so we live in a similar world where we cannot access purchasing our own housing or building our own businesses. And so I believe that we are not a financial risk. We are a revolution just waiting to happen if we can find a neighbor who would trust us first. And so that's the empowerment that I'm trying to bring to people. And I think the easiest way to get started, honestly, is my book. It's a whole guide on how to start and do this whole process in your neighborhood with people. And it's absolutely everything you need to do it. So, and if you want
there's
more
great
help,
everyone, go get that book. It's free.
It's free.
Mel's giving
it's
this
free.
away for free.
Yeah. Just Google it. Bank on Your Neighbor. It's on a podcast. It's my own voice. I've made it just for you. And I just want to disseminate that information because at the end of the day, I'm about financial literacy. And for folks who want to really get into it, I have the Seller Financing Academy, and I coach folks, in that context within a cohort and a community. And so if you want extra help, you can come there, but the book will get you started.
Sure will. Awesome. Mel, thank you so much for coming on the show. I love this conversation.
Oh, thank you so much. This was an absolute pleasure. I love what you're doing here, and thanks for the opportunity.
Okay, dudes, I found the name of that microfinance platform I was talking about. It's called Kiva, KIVA.org. And I'm looking here, and Amelia needs $325 to buy corn and cooking oil and soap for her restaurant in Sierra Leone. And you can contribute as little as $25 towards that loan. And this is a business loan. It's not a charity. Anyway, if you were inspired by Mel's microfinance work in India, this kiva.org is a great place to check that out. Okay. And I have to say, when I read Mel's book, I was struck, of course, by the possibilities they describe with seller financing, but also the many ways that we can be diverting all of that money from large organizations to our own community. I really highly recommend Mel's book, and I'm going to leave the link below. But listen, before you go, 3 things. 1, Send this to anyone you know who's having that horrible realization that Mel had when her dad got sick. That realization that even if you work your ass off, you're not going to have enough money. 2, if this conversation impacted you, maybe send a little love to Mel's vision of speaking at Davos and teaching the world about more equitable economic models. And 3, then I want you to hit the SpeakPipe link and maybe, if you're brave enough, share me your big vision. And to reward your bravery, we will all send some love back to you because you never know what's going to happen. I'll see you next week. Hey dude, thanks for listening. If you like this episode, make sure you're subscribed so you can get the next one. And by the way, if you rate and review this podcast, it really helps me get found by other people who need some goals, grit, and some woo-woo shit. And be sure to connect and DM me at Una Duncan on Instagram and let me know what you thought of the episode. Chat soon.